Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. I'm your host, Lonnie Jones, and the adventure part is basically just our experiences. And some of those experiences are as mundane as growing up, being married, being a young married couple with a kid, or being a middle-aged couple with grandkids. Some of the experiences will be my adventures as an outdoorsman, a rock climber, a fisherman, a hunter, or my experiences as a police chaplain who's been assigned to a SWAT team for over 30 years. Some of that adventure may even boil down to the idea that there's a belief that I'm a chaotic Jedi. And either way, we'll take the experiences or the adventures and we'll talk about the facts. The facts will lead to concepts, and the concepts lead to application. Basically, it will be anecdotal wisdom. One cautionary word about the facts is we will tell you the facts just as they happened, but sometimes we'll tell you the facts the way we remember them happening, and sometimes we'll tell you the facts the way we've heard other people tell us the way they remember them happening. In any occasion, it's not an attempt to deceive. There'll be a little bit of embellishment, and it's an all good, clean fun and for learning purposes only. Thank you for keeping up with Jones. Introducing the Bible degree with digital ministry. Paul used the marketplace and the synagogue to reach an expanded audience. We have access to the internet and social media. I once heard it said that when McDonald's introduced the drive-through window, they did not change the Big Mac, only how it was delivered. Faulkner University is now offering a new digital ministry track for their Bible degree. Faulkner's degree provides training in understanding and teaching the gospel, alongside training that will allow students to create quality digital content. Opportunities for evangelism in the digital spaces is unlimited, and this is innovative ministry education for our contemporary culture. One of the instructors is a two-time Emmy-winning former ESPN designer. Members of the Church of Christ could be eligible for the full tuition Jack Zorn Scholarship in order to pursue this special area of study. For more information, contact admissions at faulkner.edu. That is admissions at faulkner.edu. Faulkner University is a digital partner with Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. TKM Incorporated in Moss, Tennessee is a construction company that specializes in erosion control, seeding, and soil, hydroseeding, hydromulch, minor excavation, and silt fence. They also provide traffic control and construction signs. Their business is keeping people safe, but their passion, their mission, is they wish that all men could be saved. TKM has adopted the nickname the King's Men because as they serve you, they also serve the King. If they could provide any of their services for you, please contact them at 931-243-3958. That is 931-243-3958. Or you can contact them on the net at tkminc2001 at twlakes.net. That is tkminc2001 at twlakes.net. TKM Incorporated is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. Before there was TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, email, or even voicemail, there was 1136. 1136 was a small oblong metal box set in a wall with other nondescript metal boxes like 1135 and 1134. This was my campus mailbox. And this was in the late 1900s. It was 1981, and I was a young man, and there was no such thing as email. One could not simply sit down and text someone. There was no such thing as a cell phone. The phone company, there were telephones, but they were attached to a wall or they sat on a desk. The phone company charged you not for data or bandwidth, but for long distance. whatever that was. I remember negotiating with a cable phone person who was trying to sell me the snake oil of data. I said, young lady, you haven't been around long enough to remember that your company used to charge people for long distance. It didn't cost your company any more for me to talk to someone across the state as it did to talk to someone across the street. But you charged me for it, and you created the perception that it cost more, and you charged people for it. When cell phone companies showed up, all the long distance nonsense went away, and the major long distance companies went away with them. They no longer exist. So the same thing's going to happen to you and data when somebody says, hey, you know what? We're not going to charge for data anymore because, it really doesn't cost anything. When you're not the only girl at the prom, I'll do with you just what I did with MCI. She said, who? Never mind. It used to be a phone company. I'll dance with somebody else when you're not the only girl at the prom. And what does long distance really mean? You think about that as a concept. If I'm not close enough to talk to you in person, then it's all long distance. But there was this arbitrary line that if you called outside of this area code, you incurred 10 cents a minute. I remember looking at the phone bill with dread when I had a long distance relationship or had a crush on a girl from camp outside the state, and you get your phone bill and, oh no, you had to look at it. Well, now I'm in college. I had an MCI calling card. It looked like a credit card, and it had a series of digits, 16 digits to be exact. And if you punched them into a phone that was attached to a wall, then you punched that series of 16 numbers in. Then you had to punch a phone number in, and then you would call home. And you always had to do it after 9 o'clock on a Wednesday night because the long distance rates were lower. I wonder why the part of my brain that used to remember phone numbers can't remember my passwords. Anyway, in those days, phone calls cost money, and you had to sit near a phone on a wall or sit near a phone on a desk, or you had to be in a tiny little glass booth in order even to receive or answer a call. Before there were calling cards, you could pick up the phone and talk to an operator and say, hey, I'd like to make a collect call. And the collect call simply meant that the operator would call the person that you wanted to talk to and say, we have a collect call from, and they'd state your name, and then will you accept the charges? And they could say, yeah, they'll talk to you or wouldn't. And if they didn't accept the charges, then the operator said, hey, they've refused the charges, and they'd hung up on you. Later days, they automated this process. And in automating this process, you dial in the magic numbers, and you'd get this voice that would say, you have a collect call from, and then you had the prompt to state your name. And so you'd say, you have a collect call from Lonnie Jones, and then they could accept or reject the charges. When it became automated, people started trying to dodge the system. And so many times you might make a phone call and the person on the other end would say, you have a collect call from, I got to grandma safely. You have a collect call from It's a Boy. And then instead of accepting the call, they'd already received their message and they knew what was going on. Because this was such a hassle, and because we were not an instant gratification society, we often use this thing called the mail. Not email, but real mail. And box 1136 was my connection to the outside world. And the closest thing we had to email was this magical thing called campus mail. Now, campus mail was just that. If you lived on campus or you wanted to drop by the campus post office, you could just leave something at the window and say, hey, put that in box 1136. Or I'd like to leave this for 1136, and it was too big to fit in the box. You'd get a note in your box that said, hey, come to the window, somebody left you something. And you could use campus mail with no stamp, no charge. All you had to do was put it in the window and say, hey, give this to this box and state the box number. If I was not addicted to my mailbox, at least I was somewhat dependent on it. My mailbox was the source of news. It was the source of gifts, prizes, and surprises. We had this interesting phenomenon on campus. There were these social clubs, which is a Christian university's answer to fraternities and sororities. But the social clubs, the girls would often ask a young man to be their beau, B-E-A-U. And the young man who was the beau for a girls' club would lead their devotionals. He would be in charge of, helping them with their sports teams. He would be in charge of, some little projects like that. And oftentimes these guys were treated like royalty. If you were the beau for a club, every girl in the club would probably make you cookies at some point or another. But anyway, the boys' clubs would elect a girl to be their queen. And if you were a queen for a boys' club, then you made cookies for all the boys in the club, and you would make these little batches of cookies, and you put them in little baggies, and you'd take them to campus mail. And so it was a very unfair relationship. If you were the beau of a girls' club, you didn't do a lot of service. But if you were the queen for a boys' club, then you were basically this glorified mascot that did a lot of service projects. I was in the student center one day. And my student center, this is a large empty area with a little short order grill, some booths, some tables, and a ping pong table. And I was sitting there, and I don't remember if I was reading or drawing or something, and a cute girl from Texas needed some counseling. And I've always been a people person. And she had this problem. She said she was trying to get the attention of a young man, and she was failing. Her deep brown Texas eyes shone with concern. And so I said, well, what are you trying to do to get this guy's attention? Are you talking to him? And yes. And do you attend, the stuff he does, like when he plays ball or does something like, yeah, I do that. Do you compliment him? Yes. Do you flirt with him? Yes, 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 and yes. Well, if you're doing all those kind of efforts and he doesn't get those hints, then he's as blind as a no-eared bat and maybe as stupid as a run-over dog. Maybe he just thinks you're being nice, and if you're being that nice to him and he doesn't notice you and ask you out, you should probably just ignore him. Maybe in a last-ditch effort, maybe you should send him some cookies in campus mail. And if he doesn't get that, he's probably too dumb for you. He's probably a waste of your time. Yeah, you guessed it. The next day I had chocolate chip cookies in my mailbox, but I digress. Checking my mailbox became a ritual. I checked it at least 3 times a day, sometimes even more. I'd check it after breakfast. I would check it after lunch. I'd check it right before dinner. I'd check it when I knew the mail ran. I'd check it sometimes when the mail hadn't run, because they put campus mail in at a lot of different times. My mom always wrote me. And every month I had to write a lady named Donna Barler. She was the benefactor of the Baker Scholarship and was responsible for about 50% of my tuition while I was in college. This is a lady that I only met once in my life, and she gave me this scholarship without ever having met me. But I'd open my little box, and sometimes they were gifts, sometimes they were cards, sometimes they were invitations to events, and very, very often there was just random money. Now, the random money is this interesting thing. I remember walking across campus many, many times with my dear friend Paul Richardson. He is and was one of my most cherished friends. We were walking across campus and said, hey, I need to run by and check my mail. Why? Well, this weekend I have to preach somewhere, and I don't have gas money. He stopped and looked at me. Does someone owe you money? No. Is it your birthday? No. Are you expecting any money? No. But if I need money to go preach, it often just shows up randomly in my box. Somebody from home, a little old lady from a church, somebody would just randomly think about me, and sometimes they just randomly send me a gift. He shook his head. He said, that's not how the world works. And I looked at him and said, well, that's how my world works. You see, he was an accounting business major, and he often quoted Uncle Milton Friedman, to me about how things worked economically. Once, after one of these discussions, I opened box 1136 to find that I did indeed have preaching gas money, to which he replied, this is unbelievable. You can't live this way. When we get out of here, I want you to send me your taxes every year. I want to keep up with this adventure. And for the last, I don't know how many years, we graduated in 1985. He's done my taxes. He'll retire this year. I'm looking for a new tax guy if you know one. But he said, you just can't live this way. Well, don't get me wrong. I worked on campus. I was in what they call work study. I was a janitor in the Bible building. I did odd jobs for farmers. I walked the parking lot of high school events as security. I sold artwork out of my dorm room. But even all those efforts often fell short, and sometimes I just needed extra money. Once I got called to the business office, And because I had changed my schedule and I was not taking the full 15 hours that I'd originally signed up for, I had to drop a class because I couldn't afford the art supplies for the class. The business office called me in and said, hey, we paid you this money on work study, and because your actual signed up classes versus what we thought we billed you for doesn't match, you actually get to have some cash. And one time I got to actually see some real money from my work study stuff. And I remember cashing that check. And I remember filling up West Wind, my 68 Chevy, with gas. I bought a new pair of gloves, and I went and had a double cheeseburger from Wendy's, and it may have been the best hamburger I ever had. In 4 years of preaching off campus, and the last 2 of those years I spent driving back and forth to Salem, Arkansas, which was a 2-hour drive north of campus. In those 4 years of going to various places to preach outside of the campus, I never did not have gas money, and I never had to borrow money. Money just always showed up in box 1136. So you get it. I ritualistically, if not compulsively, checked my campus mailbox. Now, I've come to learn that this ritual is very, very powerful because it involves a thing called a variable schedule of reinforcement, or a ratio variable, or a variable ratio of reinforcement. There wasn't always something in the mail. Sometimes I had mail with no money, and sometimes I didn't even have any mail. But often there was something in there, and it was there often enough and random enough to keep me coming back. The anticipation of having something in the mail was just as exciting as actually receiving something in the mail. That's why randomly checking your voicemail, checking your email, looking at social media for likes, shares, and comments becomes so time consuming, because that is it's the strongest form of building an addiction that there is. You see, you get just as much dopamine from thinking that you might have prizes, surprises, or likes as you do from actually getting the prize, the surprise, or the likes. That's the technology, that's the theory that makes slot machines, lotto tickets, and gambling have this powerful draw they have on people. Now, there is a difference, and it's a subtle difference, and we use the words interchangeably, but really they shouldn't be sometimes. There's a difference between reinforcement and reward, and the difference is subtle but important. A reward is given for a behavior, but a reinforcer actually changes behavior. A reward is a thing. Reinforcement, or a reinforcer, is a process. A reinforcer is defined as a stimulus change following a behavior that increases the future likelihood of the specified or target behavior. Variable ratio schedule is the most powerful form of effective reinforcement that there is. Reinforcement is delivered or occurs after an unpredictable number of responses. So you don't know when it's going to occur. And so since you don't know when the reinforcement will occur, it creates a steady state of behavior. The behavior increases in anticipation of the reinforcer. 2 things are very important to distinguish and to know. We often misunderstood probabilities. They call it the gambler's fallacy. Since this ball hadn't landed on black 13 in 5 times, it's bound to land on black 13 next time. That's not how probability works. But in a variable ratio, it is safe to assume that the reinforcer will occur next time, since it didn't occur this time. Now, that doesn't change the probabilities, but it changes the anticipation. It changes the frequency. Well, I checked my mail and didn't have anything. I checked my mail and didn't have anything. Well, maybe there'll be mail in it next time. That's not based on a probability. That's just based on I get mail in the mailbox. It's the same thing as, hey, I didn't see a deer this morning. I might see a deer this afternoon. I didn't catch a fish on this cast. I might catch a fish on the next cast. Expectation and anticipation. And so the more you do, the more you get, even when it doesn't happen every time. And like we said, that's how hunting, fishing, gambling, metal detecting, social media, and lots of other things have this type of reinforcement. And that's not only why they're enjoyable, but why they become ritualistic, compulsive, if not addictive. The key here is what is reinforcing you and who is reinforcing you, because that reinforcement algorithm is the key to control. And whoever controls your reinforcers controls you. Whatever or whoever manages the reinforcement has the most potential to alter or control our behavior. I may be being reinforced for behavior, but what does that behavior cost me? And what does it do for the people who actually control the reinforcement schedule? Social media basically competes for your face time. How much time do you spend looking at an ad, looking at a reel, looking for likes, looking for shares? And there's somebody out there who benefits from your face being attached to that phone or that tablet or that screen. Hunting, shopping, fishing, metal detecting, they all have a degree of variable ratio, and it's inherent in it. Because you don't always catch a fish, you don't always find something with your metal detector, you don't always find a bargain, you don't always see game. But it happens so much that the expectation of being successful is strong enough, hey, that you'll go back and do it, and it's enjoyable just to have the expectation. It's rarely do you say, well, I had a miserable time because I didn't see anything. It's I got to go in the chance that I might see something. Those things who have variable reinforcement, those things that are being used to control us, there are things that are used to manipulate and to have us being manipulated. The difference in this is an intrinsic versus an extrinsic reward or reinforcement. To quote Johnny Ringo from Tombstone, I want your blood, and I want your souls, and I want them both right now. Some things have rewards in and of themselves. Others often offer prizes and trinkets. And controlling my vulnerability or my susceptibility to that reinforcement is the essential key to having my own autonomy. Am I being reinforced? Am I repeating behaviors because I'm trying to deal with other people, somebody else's, an external control of their perceptions, their likes, their approval, their accolades, their trinkets, their prizes, their snacks, all those external things that I have little to no control over? You see, if my major reinforcers are external, then my locus of control is external, and I am being controlled. You control me, they control me, or it controls me, whatever you, they, or it represents. My friend Jason Brightwell is a runner, a good runner, a very dedicated runner, and he's done several long distance runs. And I remember when he ran an ultra marathon. That's 100 miles for those of you who are keeping score. But he ran a 100-mile marathon, and he got a belt buckle. And his wife, Tiffany Brasher Brightwell, sardonically commented, "You did all that training, and you did all that running, and you did all that suffering for a belt buckle?" Well, the obvious answer is it's not about the belt buckle, but what the belt buckle represents. You see, the belt buckle represents the intrinsic value of discipline, motivation, hard work, tenacity, and commitment. The belt buckle is not made of gold or silver or titanium, but you can't buy it anyway. It has to be earned. The belt buckle is not the reward. The belt buckle represents a process that is an internally rewarding thing. If the reinforcement is gained because of process, progress, strength, discipline, endurance, growth, or improvement, if I choose to live intentionally, thus that I create an internal locus of control based on intrinsic value, it makes me less susceptible or vulnerable to manipulation based on ease, social trends, comfort, because of or regardless of the perception of others, convenience, emotion, impulse, the latest fad, or how popular something might or might not be. I don't get stronger after every workout. I don't learn something every time I take a class or a seminar. I don't get better every time I drill or perform a rep or go to a practice. But the anticipation of the cumulative effect that if I keep working, if I keep working out, if I keep doing the study, if I keep doing this, if I keep coming back to the same process, then I understand that my metric for reward is intrinsic. It's not about being rewarded or manipulating by some outside source. It's being motivated. It's being rewarded. It's being reinforced by a process that is based on intrinsic value, not extrinsic value. You see, the reward and the reinforcement is not manipulated. It's intentional. It's controlled. And those type rewards, discipline and motivation and strength and improvement, those rewards are not variable. They are guaranteed. Using the tool of shortwave radio, World Christian Broadcasting literally covers the world every day with the gospel. They use 2 large curtain antennas. One is located in Anchor Point, Alaska, and the other in Madagascar. They send out messages that are recorded at their international home in Franklin, Tennessee. They make available 40 hours of broadcast every day. The broadcasts are made in English, Chinese, Russian, Spanish, Portuguese, Korean, English for Africa, and Arabic. They would love for your group to visit them. You can bring your ladies group, your youth group, or your men's group. Just give them a call at 615-371-8707, 615-371-8707, or you can go to 3Ws worldchristian.org, find the Donate Here button, and make a financial contribution to support this work that literally covers the world every day with the gospel. World Christian Broadcasting, in cooperation with Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure.